This is also going to be recorded, so it will be available. But you will not be shown on the recording. Okay, so welcome everybody. It is really cool to be with you tonight to talk about something that's really important. It's been such a big part of my journey. It's where my journey in this work began, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. So please close your eyes if you are comfortable to do that, and let's just become more present in our body, in our bodies, and put one or both hands on your heart center in the middle of your chest, and take a deep, slow breath in and breathe out. And as you're breathing, just imagine, just have the awareness that as you're breathing in, you're breathing into your heart center. And as you're breathing out from your heart center. And each breath, breathing in your heart, breathing out of your heart center, and just deepening into your body, into your breath. And feel your chest, your belly gently rising, gently relaxing. And maybe even become aware of the subtlety of your breath on the edge of your nostrils. And aware of how each breath fills your lungs, fills your chest. And for a couple of breaths, focus on your exhale. Focus on your out breath. And just be aware of breathing to the very bottom of your exhale, the very end of your breath, letting everything out. And the next breath will automatically, naturally be a little deeper. As you breathe out fully, aware of your heart, aware of your body. And make your next breath even deeper, even fuller. A really slow, deep inhale into your heart. And a really slow exhale. And slowly open your eyes. Beautiful. So for those of you who don't know me, I work in the field of conscious sexuality. I live in Johannesburg in South Africa. I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And a great part of my work is with touch, and that's really where the journey began for me. So how I got into this was firstly a terrible fear of sex as a teenager, such enormous desire and such fear. What did you do after kissing? And how did you go to the next step? And how did you just put your hands on a breast? And what did you do? And that just terrified me enormously. But such desire and such interest in sex at the same time. And from teenage years, an awareness of energy, of spirituality, and somehow being aware that those were connected, not really knowing how, but understanding that there was a connection between those. And then my very first serious career choice was actually going to be a rabbi. And to do that, or to go to the rabbinical college I wanted to go to, you needed an undergrad degree. So I thought psychology would be really good. So I went to university in Johannesburg to study psychology. And in the first year course, there are a lot of touch studies. What happens to babies that don't get affection and adults that don't get hugged. And that really fascinated me. And I went to learn a very basic massage course to explore the idea of touch more. And I really enjoyed that. Something about it really grabbed me. It was really very basic massage. It was very technique based. It was quite clinical in this field called Swedish massage, which has just become kind of a blanket term for so many different kinds of massage. And there were all these really strange rules in it that once you touch the body, you never let go. So there was all this contortioning of moving to the next part of the body and getting oil and towels and all of that stuff. But at the time, it was important, and it was interesting learning. And after that, I just kept learning whatever I could in the fields of touch, of massage. In South Africa back then, there wasn't a lot. But every workshop I heard about, I went on and really enjoyed this. I realized I wasn't going to be a rabbi. I realized I was not going to be a psychologist either. And this field really drew me. And I became aware, I learned about something called Touch for Health, which was the beginnings of kinesiology. And I went on a kinesiology workshop. I didn't understand anything about it, but something in it really interested me. So I kind of went for more. And I heard about a professional level workshop that I got onto. And about halfway through that, something about it clicked inside. And I said, wow, I want to do this. And I learned a lot and started practicing kinesiology. I was a member of a small private gym at the time, and they were remodeling the gym. And I went to them and said, don't you want to build me an office and I'm going to do sports massage? And they said, sure. They never asked me if I actually knew anything about sports massage, which was kind of interesting and quite fortunate. So I jumped in with both feet, knowing a lot and not knowing a lot, and went on a very steep learning curve. At the same time, learning kinesiology, and at the same time, learning everything that I could in spirituality, in energy, in sexuality. I went on a really deep journey of personal sexual exploration and experiencing, and kept being entwined in all of these different fields. And about 20 years ago, said, this is what I want to do. And I woke up, again, jumping in with both feet, knowing a lot, not knowing a lot. And more than 20 years later, here we are. And most of what I do, I've developed myself over time, from learning, from listening, from watching, and drawing from so many different fields. And touch has always been such a big part of this work. And even the last 2 weeks, I was in Cape Town teaching a whole lot of touch workshops and practices. And on a retreat that a friend of mine was running, I was there to assist, called the Lovers Training. And a part of this is an experience called the Yoga of Touch, Kashmiri massage, which is very much touch as a meditation in so many ways. So why is touch so important to us? Firstly, we need touch to grow. Our nervous systems and our bodies need touch. Without that, there is a level of development that is locked to us and that we are locked out of, that is incredibly important for social communication, for social awareness. It does so much for our health on so many levels. And there are books written about the importance of touch. So from my perspective, the framework that I work in is this. Everything that we do comes out of a pattern. The patterns are in our minds and the patterns are in our bodies. And that's really important to understand, because the patterning in the body keeps us doing what it is that we do in certain situations and in circumstances, regardless of what the mind wants to do, because the body holds our subconscious patterns. So it holds levels of patterning that we're not even consciously aware of. So the easiest way to understand the patterns is that every time you brush your teeth in the same way. You bath or shower, you wash in the same way. You eat in the same way. Sexually and in life and in relationship, we tend to do exactly the same thing again and again and again. The patterns come from three places. They are what works or what we think works, which is generally closer to the truth. It's what we know, and it's our comfort zone. The patterns have nothing to do with happiness, and the patterns have nothing to do with fulfillment. Most of what we do is simply the patterning that is based in safety and survival, or what our mind considers to be safety and survival. And for the mind, that generally means doing what it is that we know simply because we know it. So we stay in unhappy relationships, we stay in unfulfilled jobs, we stay doing the things that we do, going to the places that we go to, having the friendships, the relationships that we have, often simply because we know them. You know that old saying, better the devil you know, and that is why we stay doing so much of what it is that we do. Our body becomes really patterned to do what it does in so many ways. So this is what happens with the body. It starts with the idea of something called muscle memory. So if you watch a baby learning to eat, you give a baby the spoon and the spoon goes all over, and eventually the spoon goes in the food, and the spoon and the food go all over until eventually the baby gets the spoon and the food in its mouth. Now we can eat and we can have an intense conversation while we're eating, and we hardly look at what our hands are doing because we know the pattern of it so well. Our body knows the pattern of it. Every time we do something, our brain registers what it is that we're doing through the communication between the body and the brain via our nervous system, via the spinal cord, via the vagus nerve. And there's some really interesting stuff coming out about female sexuality and the vagus nerve that I'll share with you a little bit later. I don't think any of this research has been done with men yet, which is going to be interesting as to where that's going, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And if I don't, please remind me if I happen to forget. So when something stressful happens to us, when something traumatic happens to us, we contract. Sometimes it's very slight, it's subconscious. We're not aware of the contraction. We don't release the contraction, it stays there. And every time after that, we do something similar, and it just has to be similar because that's the way the brain works, is on similarities. We contract more, until so many of our patterns are set in the body. Not only physical patterns, but emotional patterns as well. And that's really important to understand, that our body holds our emotions. So much of our emotion is stored in our body. And when there's been something stressful, when there's been something traumatic, when there's been something that we feel guilty about, that we feel shamed about, that we're embarrassed about, it stays in our body. And the body just keeps repeating the patterns that it has. So for example, as a woman, if you are not having orgasms, and you say, tonight's the night, it's going to happen, and you do all this work in your mind, and you clear a whole lot of mental patterns about it, your body is still holding on to the pattern that it has. And regardless of what your mind wants to do, your body is going to carry on doing what it has been patterned to do. So the tissues of our body hold us. And there's a woman called Caroline Myss, M-Y-S-S. I'll type her name here. And if you haven't read some of her work, I highly recommend it. So her most famous book was called Energy Anatomy, or Anatomy of the Spirit. I forget which the title is. And she talks about a lot of what we're talking about here. And her big saying is, your biology is your biography. That means our story is in our bodies. So we hold on to so much of that past in our bodies. And so much of that is not only ours, because our patterning is often generational and tribal and religious and family. So all of that is represented in our physicality. This is also our home for this life, for this earth journey. This is the home that we have. This carries us through life. And the way that our body is so representative of so much of what we do. I'll tell you something. I've always been fascinated by big people. Big people just have always been so interesting to me. And if you saw me standing up, I'm 5'4", 5'5". I don't know what that is in meters and whatever, but I'm a small guy. Big people have always fascinated me. And I was talking to somebody once about this, and he said to me, you know, it's so interesting. If you were really big, you couldn't do what you do because you would be so overwhelming in that space. And I kind of thought about that and said, there's something there. So it simply is that our bodies are so important in us. They also become such a guide for so much of life because our bodies house our senses. Not only the 5 senses that we generally talk about, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, but also our intuition, our feelings are in our bodies. We can be aware of energy in our bodies. You know, when you meet someone, before anything else, there's an energy connection. It's like you walk into a room full of people. There are people you are going to be drawn to and talk to, and there are people you are never going to go near. All of that happens on so many levels inside of us, but all of that is something happening in our bodies. So it's something that's very, very physical. It's very visceral, even if it's very subtle. So much of the past, so much of our hurt, so much of our pain is held in that contraction. So much of the limitation that we have, so much of our inhibitions. And there is such judgment of our bodies, the way that we are supposed to look, the way that we're supposed to smell, the way that we're supposed to taste, so much about that. And the deepest part of that is, for men and women, is our genitals, where there is so much judgment around that. And the porn industry has given us this incredible level of insecurity about our bodies and about our sexuality. There's actually something quite interesting. It was Norway or Finland, and I don't remember which one it was. And what happened is that there was quite high levels of people watching porn in the country. And that by itself wasn't such an issue. But what they started realizing was it gives people a totally warped perspective of sex. Because porn sex is not real people sex. It's choreographed, it's acted, it's edited, and a lot of people think when you're watching a porn movie, that's how it happens, but it doesn't happen like that. So what they did was they got a whole lot of normal people, a range of people with normal bodies to have sex. And they filmed this, they put it on national TV. And in this, they showed everything. They showed people who lost erections. They showed people who fought during sex. They showed people who lost kind of genital contact, the whole range of possibilities. And what was so beautiful was it was just so real and not about this fantasy. So I kind of lost where I was after that little digression. Our bodies hold so much of our patterns. And in terms of healing, in terms of growth, in terms of exploration, if we don't go into the body, if we don't do the body work, then essentially we're doing everything kind of from the neck up, because all that is about the mind and about the brain. Now, that's important. There's no question of that. But until we do the body work, our patterns and very often our deepest pain stay stuck inside of us. And when we are in similar situations, it just gets triggered again and again and again. So when we start to move that in the body, that's where we start to release so much. And when we work with the mind, that's very much about consciousness, and a narrow level of consciousness, which wants to analyze everything, which wants to explain everything, which wants to put it in a box with a whole lot of labels. And when we do that, we just create a story around something. And the mind is often going to give us the story that it likes, the story that it kind of feels most comfortable with, which often doesn't have a lot to do with the truth. But what happens if we don't remember something that happened, but the pain is still there? And what happens if we don't remember the details, but the pattern and the pain is still in the body? Does that mean we can't clear it? Absolutely not. Because through the body, we can clear things that we don't have to be consciously aware of what they are. So as wonderful as the mind is, and it's our best friend, it's our worst enemy, it's all of those things at once, the limitation on that is the way that the mind works. But the body is an expression of energy. So let's talk a little bit about energy. Everything in our world is a frequency. So every color has a frequency. Every sound has a frequency. Every organ in the body has a range of optimal health. Anything above or below that is not healthy. Every emotion has a frequency. And the frequency of emotion is the same in all of us. The triggers are different. So what that means is what makes you angry is different to what makes me angry. But the pattern of that is exactly the same in all of us. Everything that we do, everything that's been done to us falls into a frequency. It's like a river. And if the river isn't flowing, behind where the water gets blocked, it gets dirty and nasty and full of mosquitoes and all sorts of junk builds up there. Those become the point of blockage in our lives. So we get to that point, we don't know how to get past there, we kind of swirl around, we back off, we come back to the same thing again. When we start to release what's blocked in the body, that energy can start to move. And that starts to give the mind something different. So when something in our body feels different, when something has been released there, when it feels lighter, when it feels more relaxed, when there's a greater range of motion in a joint, the brain registers that there's something different there. There can be different thoughts around that, a different awareness. We can go back to the body, we can go back to the mind. So we need the mind and we need the body. And unfortunately, in a very objectified Western perspective of humans, so many people see the mind and the body as separate entities. We are one. Not only are we one entity, and all of those elements are just different aspects of who we are, but we are also one entity with life. And, you know, on the tantric path, one of the biggest learnings is that we're not separate from life. We're not disconnected from life. And everyone is simply a reflection, an aspect of ourselves. But when we separate the mind and we separate the body, and we separate them from each other, we're putting ourselves into these very separate, very disconnected elements. And I talk a lot about how healing is a journey of connection. It's connecting with parts of ourselves that we've disconnected from through judgment, through stress, through trauma, or being disconnected from. Again, through judgment, through stress, through trauma. And the healing journey is bringing all these parts of ourselves home, bringing ourselves back to ourselves, all the places that we've left ourselves, that we've left our energy. And when we do this, our bodies change and our bodies feel that. And the way that we do that with the body more than anything else is through touch. And every time we are touched, something in our brain registers that. It registers the position of the body when you're touched. So if we put this in a sexual context, every time you're going to have sex, your brain registers the position of your body and it kicks the pattern of that in. If that's a pain pattern, So if it's painful for a woman to be penetrated, for example, that there's a whole lot of tension at the opening of her yoni. For a man, if it's the fact that he's terrified that his erection isn't going to last, all of that becomes in the body, and our body kicks the pattern of it in. And until we change the pattern in the body, it doesn't matter how much we do with the mind, because the tissues of our body hold that. And as we release that, the body can be different. The body can be looser. The body can be more relaxed. That energy can move, and we can feel more. And this is so important, that so many of us actually are firstly not safe in our bodies, where it's not safe for us to feel, because for so many of us, for so long, all that we have felt was hurt and pain and rejection and loneliness and so many elements like that. And through that, what becomes second after that is that we've disconnected from our bodies. I remember a little while ago, I was working with a guy whose marriage was collapsing, and he was in a level of pain that was almost unimaginable, and he totally suppressed this to the point that he actually had no feeling. He had absolutely no feeling in his body. Everything was totally, totally numb. And the level of stress of this actually caused him to collapse. So learning to feel in our bodies is really interesting. And we have been so conditioned to not feel too much. Essentially, we live in a world of mediocrity, in a world that really supports mediocrity, that everybody's kind of the same as everybody else and everybody feels the same. But when we do this, we don't allow ourselves the fullness of sensation. We don't allow ourselves the fullness of pain, and we don't allow ourselves the fullness of pleasure either, because we're not taught how to feel. We're not taught how to be with the feelings in our body, how to be with the sensations. And when something is too intense, we take a pill, we take medicine, we do something to stop the feeling. But we do the same thing with pleasure, because if we can't feel the fullness of one or the depth of one, we cannot feel the fullness of the other. And what happens then in terms of touch and in terms of sensation is that we actually don't feel anywhere near what we could. And I remember a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece that I kind of picked this arbitrary number that said, I think most of us experience about 30% of the pleasure that we're capable of feeling. And over time, I've realized it might not have been such an arbitrary number, because as you start exploring sex and pleasure and touch and sensation more, and you have deeper experiences, kind of the numbers become irrelevant in a way, simply because after a lifetime of exploring this, I've realized that what we can feel is actually limitless. And we get to a point of higher level of experience and sensation where there are no words for it, not that there are words anyway. But in a space of limitless sensation and limitless possibility, there's no way to describe these. The whole point of that really is that we've simply limited what we feel. That's all. And as soon as we do that, we limit the experience of touch. Not only being touched, but also touching someone else. And as we learn to touch and as we explore touch more with consciousness, and this is the key in this, that most of our touch is not conscious. So most of the touch of our own bodies is unconscious. You know, whether you're brushing your teeth, whether you're washing your hair, whether you are putting cream or lotion on after a bath or after a shower, most of that is not conscious. We have a functional relationship with our body in that moment rather than an emotional and conscious connection with our bodies. And the more consciousness, the more awareness we bring to this, the more we feel, and the more that we see that touch is actually a vehicle, a tool, a pathway, a channel for healing, for growth, for connection, for intimacy, firstly with ourselves before anyone else. And then it becomes a path of amazing exploration, of personal inquiry, of deep intimacy and awareness. And as our bodies become more sensitive, we become more connected to life because we feel life around us more. So one of the things that we've done with the word and the concept of sensuality, and this is a great disservice to the idea of sensuality, is that we've connected sensuality to sex. And we've said that sensuality is the foreplay of sex. And if you talk to so many people about the phrase sensual massage, they put that in a framework of something that's sexual. Sensuality is how we experience life through our senses, through sight, through sound, through touch, through smell, through taste, through awareness, through communication with each other. So the tea that I'm drinking tonight is my experience of that, the taste, the feel of the cup, everything around that. And when we can do this with greater consciousness, when we're in our bodies, we actually understand how many of these experiences are touch experiences. Eating is a touch experience. Drinking is a touch experience. Hearing with awareness is a touch experience. So expand the understanding that we have of touch, which allows us to connect with ourselves, with others in a much deeper way. And the extension of that is that the physical touch that we share with ourselves, with somebody else, becomes so much more sensitive and gives us so much more in that. So this is such a vital part of our being on so many levels. And it is only through the sense of touch and this exploration that we can release so much that is held in our bodies, so much from the past. And when we do that, that's when energy can move. So from my point of view, from a healing point of view and from a pleasure point of view, to have higher experiences, the energy in our body needs to move. Now, the first thing that prevents this is tension and tightness and contraction. And we live with so much, and I'm making a very generalized statement here, but all of us tend to live with so much tension, so much contraction that it's become our default setting. We don't even realize often how much we hold on, how tight the muscles of our shoulders are, how little we actually breathe compared to the fullness of what we can breathe, of how we rush these touch experiences, of how goal-oriented sex has become. So one of the things that touch gives us is it starts to relax us. And as soon as we start to relax, we start to soften. When we start to soften, we start to open, we start to let go, we start to release, we start to relax. And that's when that energy can move. And the more that energy can move, the more that we can feel. And there are so many different ways to do this. You know, there's deep touch, there's gentle touch, there's pressure point touch, there's working really deeply into muscles, there's touching really gently. There are so many different ways and different schools of doing this. I started out doing sports massage and sports work. I worked with athletes, I worked with dancers, and all of that was like really deep muscle work. And I was talking to a friend of mine one day, a homeopath, and he said to me, have you ever thought that when you work so deeply, you're actually pushing these problems deeper into the muscle? And I said to him, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It was this kind of ego response. And then I sat down and I really thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought maybe he has a point. At time for me, that's become a very, very gentle, very slow touch in terms of relaxing the body, of opening, of allowing things to release, not trying to make them happen, not trying to force that. Because as soon as we push hard, there's resistance. So the more we push, the more resistance. And the more resistance, the more we push. As soon as the resistance collapses, we can move and the body can move. And over time, and especially this past year, the deepest awareness for me has been of the subtlety of touch, actually doing a whole lot less, and over time connecting really deeply with our bodies, with our cells, with our nervous systems. And that allows the body to heal itself. Because within us is this incredible wisdom. And this wisdom knows exactly what it is that we need to heal, that we need to release. And when we make this available to the body does so much all by itself without us having to decide, where does it need to go? How does it need to happen? Because that is always going to be based on such a limited level of information. And when we can connect with the body in that touch with a sense of really deep intuition, which comes from intimacy it's a natural extension of intimacy, we can flow with the body in that. And then so much of our touch becomes a space where healing and pleasure and comfort and intimacy and knowing all mixed, they're all in the same place at the same time. And in a way, that's part of how we are. It's not that any of the experiences are separate. If you are held with love, that's incredibly comforting. And it can be really pleasurable. And you can have sexual experiences that are mind-blowingly pleasurable, that really are about building energy in the body through touch, spreading it through your body. And not only are those incredibly pleasurable, they can take you to higher states of consciousness, but they're also incredibly healing and releasing. And that doesn't mean that it's issues that we're dealing with. It's supporting us. It's building our immune systems. It's enhancing the way that our body works, the communication between our nervous system and our muscles and our joints and the brain and organs. And the more we do this and the more we are touched, the more our bodies come into a much greater state of health and well-being naturally. And what's so interesting in this past year is how distanced we've become from each other. And one of a man who has always inspired me and who I've learned so much from, Joseph Kramer, talks about how the real pandemic of the moment is the disconnect from each other, the physical disconnect, the isolation that so many of us have experienced, because so many people have been so physically isolated and alone in this. And for so many people, still being touched at the moment is an incredibly difficult and challenging and sometimes fearful space. And I think from what I see at the moment, touch is something that is so needed for all of us, simply in terms of sometimes just the reassurance of somebody acknowledging us and holding us, without it having to be a whole lot more than that. And in this world of incredibly overstimulated nervous systems, the touch really allows us to take a breath and to come back to ourselves, to come back into presence with ourselves, to slow everything down and to feel. And this is vital because without the feelings, we are so disconnected from some of the biggest parts of who we are. It just becomes thought, it becomes the mind, and everything is about analyzing it. Everything is about taking it apart, it's putting it in a box, and not allowing us to feel. And the feelings often have the greatest sense of truth. Which I think says quite a lot. And I just remembered something, what I said I was going to talk about, something that's been really interesting in female sexuality. So probably most of the people that, not probably, definitely, most of the people that I work with are women. And somebody actually asked me yesterday, why on all of these workshops and all of these retreats, are there more women than men? As a generalization, women have a greater desire to heal, to grow, to explore. For men, the space of vulnerability in that is still a space that for so many men is difficult, that's challenging, that's forbidden. And even on the retreat I was on, we saw some of this, how reticent men are to touch other men, not in a sexual way, but in a way of intimacy, to share a massage experience with another man. And even I did an experience that I do called a water flow massage, which happens in an indoor heated pool. We did one on Tuesday night, and there were more men than women. It doesn't happen often, but it did. And for some men, this becomes such a challenging space. So the vulnerability for men is something that's very new. It's very challenging. It's very scary for so many men. And because of that, and in South Africa especially, where there is such a kind of definition of what it is to be a man, which is really strong and big boys don't cry and all of this real kind of He-Man macho bullshit stuff. For men to come and do this work is huge. And that's why I work with so many more women. And one of the interesting things that's coming out is I spoke about how between our bodies and our spinal cord and nervous system, that's where so many of our touch patterns get stuck and blocked. What's been discovered lately, which is really interesting, is that inside a yoni, deep inside, the points of that are deep inside a yoni, right at the back of the G spot, the A spot, the P spot, areas near the cervix, those hold an incredibly deep amount of emotional patterning and hurt. And when you're working deeper inside, you're actually connecting with the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in the body, and it connects with our entire digestive system, which is where our second and third and fourth brains are. For a long time, we thought we had a brain and that was it. And there was always this joke that men had two brains and only one at a time was ever going to work. But over time, we've kind of really learned that in our gut, there is a brain. In our heart, there are a whole lot of cells that form the brain of the heart. So we have so much more. And the vagus nerve connects with all of these different levels of our being. So it's going to be kind of really interesting to see where the same thing, how we're going to access this with men, and where the research is going to go with that. So it just means that really deep touch for women goes to a much deeper level of the nervous system. And of course, there is a way to access it for men. We just don't know what that is yet. But again, that's all through touch, and that is so important. Which is quite a lot. That's beautiful, Elaine. Thank you. So that's a lot that I have shared with you. So now it's your time to ask questions, to talk, to say what you thought about all that. Wow, does it resonate? What does it feel like inside of you? That would be cool to hear. So type something, unmute yourself, say something.
I'll offer something. That's all right.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it resonated well with lots of sort of the Tantra teachings and things that I've had. Really appreciated, and just to bring it, the sort of the not forcing it, especially to like just really relax with it and let, when it unblocks. You can't make something happen, for sure. This is good thought, definitely.
Yeah,
I had a thought at the end with what you're talking about. If it's that kind of deep place in a woman that's connected to the vagus nerve, and I know about the vagus nerve from the gut originally, and the two-way signals it gives and all this, and the connection. Is it the prostate for the man? Because that's the equivalent in terms of how the genitalia is made up somewhat. It's
yeah,
one of the places.
it might very well be. And, you know, for men, the anal work, and for women, is incredibly deep and releasing. And there's a beautiful saying. There was a man called Chester Maynard. He's unfortunately not with us anymore, but Chester was kind of one of the world experts in anal massage. And his big saying was, open your ass and your heart will follow, because there is such a deep connection between the anus and the heart. And the interesting thing is, when you do any anal work, you are in direct connection with the nervous system. So it might very well be that the prostate's linked to that. I just don't think that the research has been done for it yet. But I know that doing that work with men is huge. And what's quite interesting is that there are some people who teach yoni massage, and in some retreat and workshop space, a man is not allowed to do yoni massage with a woman until he has been anally massaged, just to have the idea of the tenderness of this, the sensitivity. And, you know, there's a lot in that. And the allowing is huge. You know, in Taoist philosophy, which is from a Chinese perspective more than anything else, there is a great deal of the flow of energy and the allowing of that, never the force of it. Because as soon as there's force, something else is being put out of balance. And there's a beautiful philosophy as part of this called Wu Wei. The easiest way to translate that is right action. And right action means any kind of action that comes from a place inside where it flows. So I think the easiest way to explain it is you're going with the river, you're not swimming upstream in any aspect of life. But the same thing with touch, because as soon as you try and force anything in the body, there's going to be resistance. So when there's that gentleness, you actually allow the body to move, to heal, to open, to relax. So that's my take on it anyway. Thank you, Janet. That's cool to hear. So I said I was going to share a touch practice with you as part of this, and there are a few people here who work with me who know this. Would healing gut microbes affect the vagus nerve and heal sexually, mentally, emotionally? No, but it would certainly help, because the healthier that the gut is, the more everything in the body is healthy. So the things that stimulate the vagus nerve, generally, good nutrition is definitely a part of it. Cold showers, cold water stimulates the vagus nerve fabulously. Humming stimulates the vagus nerve. And especially if you hum with your lower jaw forward, that kind of stimulates that as well. What are the other practices? There are quite a few that stimulate the vagus nerve. Those are the ones that jump up that that are most accessible to people. There are others, and I've gone kind of blank on them, but those are the ones that work at the moment. So I'm going to share this practice with you, and I know some of you guys know this and you've done it with me before. Here's the interesting thing about it. It's a simple practice, and the simple practices very often have the deepest impact. And it took me a long time to really learn this and really get it. But the simplicity is so important. Okay, through physical contact with other men was through biodanza. And movement is an amazing way, and especially touch in movement is so important. But movement also gets us so into our bodies. We see the limitation, we see the patterns there. So this practice is called sensual hands dancing, and it is such as I do it more and more, I see the power in it. You know, there's a practice called the Maha Yoga. So the Maha Yoga is called the ultimate practice. It's the mother of all practices. And the saying is that if you really get the Maha Yoga, you never need to do any other practice again in your life. But to really get the Maha Yoga, because it is so simple, you need to take this like 10,000 lifetime journey, you know, not necessarily 10,000 lifetimes or 10,000 hours, according to Malcolm Gladwell, but it's a big journey to get it. And it's such a simple practice because it's actually savoring. It's the practice of savoring what is, of savoring your breath, of savoring your heart, of savoring the sounds around you, of savoring what it is that you're seeing, of savoring what it is that you're feeling. And this practice, sensual hands dancing, is pretty much kind of in line with that. It's just simply learning to be with your body in a very gentle, very slow way that opens the door to amazing presence. So take a couple of breaths in and out. Slow, deep breaths. And you might need to open your eyes just to watch what I'm doing for a moment. So bring your hands up so just your fingertips are touching. Now you need soft hands for this. So take a breath in. And as you breathe out, let your fingers and your palms relax. And then very slowly, very gently, just move your fingertips against each other. Really slowly and really gently. Small movements of just your fingers. And keep your focus on your breath and the breath moving in and out of your body so you don't get into a mind, into a story. And then take a breath in and let your fingers and your palms touch. And then begin to allow your hands to dance with each other. So touching your palms, spaces between your fingers, the back of your hands, your nails. Really slowly close your eyes if you like. So the slower that you move, the more you'll feel. And the slower that you move, the more your mind will slow down. And just let your hands dance with each other. So slowly, so softly. And then put your hands on either side of your face. And very slowly, very gently, very softly, touch your forehead. Your eyes, your nose, your cheeks, your mouth, your chin. So gently. And so slowly. Touch your ears. And breathe deep, slow breaths. And let your hands come to rest. And take a few breaths. Just be aware of what you feel. The feelings, the sensations, the energy. How does that feel? Maybe type a word or two in the chat box or unmute yourselves and say how you feel. Just a word or two maybe, if you like. So would deep tissue massage cause more issues? No, it wouldn't really cause more issues. It sometimes just means that you just sometimes hold on to things more or for longer, that's all. And sometimes deep muscle work is fabulous and it does some amazing and beautiful things in the body. So I think we need a mixture of experiences like that. That's what's really important in this. Shivery and warm and happy. That's beautiful, tingling, delicious. So that's a beautiful practice that you can do on your own anytime. And you can extend the touch into the rest of your body. And it becomes such a beautiful exploration of your body to really take time, and you can get absolutely lost in it. It's a beautiful body meditation. So thank you so much for sharing, everybody. I have really enjoyed this with you tonight enormously. I think next week, next Thursday, we are going to do kind of an open Q&A. So anything you have to ask about sex, sensuality, energy, anything about that, you are so welcome to submit your questions to me, and I'm sure something else will pop up along the way as well. To find out more about what I do, please follow me on Facebook, go to my website, which is eroslife.co. I'll type it in here, www.eros. If you'd like to subscribe to the newsletter that's on the website, I send out a lot of stuff that's in the newsletter, as well as the recording of this will be in the newsletter next week. And the link will be on my Facebook page. So next Thursday night, the same time, it's also going to be a free webinar. And then something really exciting. You guys are the first to hear about this. It all came together today. I was going to teach an expanded energy orgasm workshop, not this coming week, the following week. And at the same time, looking for a date for the last water massage for the year, because everybody wants a rest. Or my friend Christos, who runs the venue, is taking a rest. So we needed a date for that, and it all came in the same week. And then I thought, let's do a mini retreat. So four nights, 3 nights and an afternoon of immersion into sexuality, sensuality, learning, experiencing. So on Wednesday, the 9th of December, we are doing an expanded energy orgasm workshop. Thursday night of that week, we're going to do a webinar called The Art of Sex, which is so much about sexual technique. So we're going to start with oral sex. We're going to look at anatomy. We'll go into positions, penetration, the G-spot, the A-spot, the P-spot, all sorts of other pleasure spots, and then anything else people would like to know. Then Friday, the 11th of December, is the last water massage for the year. That's in Johannesburg. And on the Saturday afternoon, which is the 12th, I'm doing a mini sensual massage workshop. So that'll be from 12 to about 5 in the afternoon. It's like 4 days of immersion into aspects of learning and sexuality and sensuality. And I'm really looking forward to that. And all the information will be up in the next day or so. So thank you again for sharing. I've really enjoyed with you guys tonight, and always so cool to connect with new people and have you guys here. Thank you so much. So please share this with other people that you think would be interested. And any questions you have after this, please let me know, message, email. And I wish you all so much pleasure.